Welcome back, Honors. All right, it's good to see y'all. It's been like a hot second, right? I know all this stuff is crazy, and I know y'all are getting swept up, and I know that it's hilarious to me that y'all care about your education so much that y'all leave like somewhere in the neighborhood of totaled together by classes 130 comments on the Google Classroom pages, right? I love that. Keep talking to each other, keep staying in touch, keep getting after it. Your honors girls and your education should never stop, right? So even though people like Aubrey Berthelot wanted to film Netflix, all right? So look, you have been blessed with intelligence. So let's stay after it, right? So a lot of y'all are probably like, man, we flew through the Industrial Revolution. And I think a lot of other history teachers really like to teach that. It's not my thing, all right? So, I could go on and on for days and talk about the agricultural revolution, of course, the enclosure movement stuff, which led to the industrious revolution, which was when people started working in their houses for, smaller wages. It was like their side hustle game, you know what I mean? They were like, oh, you'd have a house full of spinners, and they would spin yarn and make money extra on that because all these new advents of the agricultural revolution freed you up for extra work on the side, right? I could talk about that for a long time. That was the industrious revolution. Be careful, that might be a review game Final Jeopardy question in one of our Google Meets review sessions. So I can talk all day about that stuff, right? But I talked about the big key things. The development of, or why it happened in Britain, the development of the middle class, the big positives of its effects on the economy, the huge negatives of its effects on the environment, and also people in general, right? The terrible factory conditions, the terrible mining conditions, its effects on regular people, working class people, right? She just wants to say, hey, she just can't help herself. Come here, little Napoleon. Come here. It's okay. All right, so Josie is here also. Can you say hello? She's not terrible. She just really gets on my nerves sometimes. And the other one's right here, actually, next to the computer. Here's Doofington.
Oh, he's very small. He's hiding. Oh, he's a very tiny boy.
Oh, Rufio, you don't want to say hello? Oh, there's a baby. All right, so the babies are here with me, and they're... Oh, your foot's caught. So, no. You are ruining this comforter. All right, also. Anyway, now, so the big thing about it is, though, we are getting more into now Europe post-Napoleonic exile version 2, all right? Some of you are like, version 2? Well, yeah, because, Napoleon was exiled twice, right? He was exiled once to Elba, as everybody on the test knew, and, I saw y'all knew. And then he was exiled to St. Helena one time as well, yeah? So, well, one time and the last time, right? He would be there for 6 years. He would have his 2 hobbies, reading and gardening, which, of course, as you can see, is my 2 big hobbies as well, very Napoleonic in fashion. Also, look, okay, all the plants are safe and sound. Tiberius, that's Tiberius, that's Gaius, Nelson. Drew is also even here, Jaden, so don't worry. He lives on right now. Anyway, but the big thing about it is, now we're getting into what the heck is Europe going to do after all this, right? Because you are going to go from a gigantic Napoleonic empire to... right back to the way things were? How does this even work? The man has changed things. It's wildly different now. What are you supposed to do? Right? So the big thing about it is, we got to talk about this. Why is the year 1815 so essential? Now, first and foremost, before we get into this, this is an AP presentation, all right? This is an essential thing for y'all to learn, the honors kids, right? Honors kids need to know this pivotal year and the rise of these things called isms, right? It's very important for y'all to understand going into AP US, other advanced history courses as well. You need to understand that this year is so essential, 1815, because go ahead and jot this down. You're seeing the rise of multiple isms, right? ISM, including conservatism, classical liberalism, communism, socialism, nationalism, right? 5 separate isms. Now, it's huge, right? It's very, very important. Sorry, you are sitting right now on a rudimentary pillow setup right now, so I can actually just see a little bit. So anyway, now, but this year is super essential because look at this guy. Why am I using Napoleon and a tube of toothpaste to try and discuss the dramatic effects that he's going to have on Europe? Because Napoleon's a lot like that tube of toothpaste, all right? You just can't, once it's out, it's what? It's out, right? There is no putting the toothpaste back in the tube, okay? Napoleon has changed things, right? He changed everything. He introduced fair tax codes, but then took rights away from women. He liberated Haiti after trying to enforce slavery there. He, introduced public schools after then letting the Catholic Church back into control of public schools inside of France. So, there's a huge set of things he's doing that are considered very, very liberal and very, very progressive, right? But at the same time, on the flip side, he's extremely conservative, right? He's an absolutist who rewrites the Constitution on his own, which violates classical liberal standards, right? So before we go any further, you know what we should do? We should go ahead and make a document based, or not, we won't do that yet. We'll do it later. Now, anyway, so the big issue that we have to deal with right now is we got to restructure Europe. We got to restructure Europe. We got to make sure the balance of power is adequate as well. That certain countries who are very dominant, militarily speaking, stay that way, right? And also, the other big thing about it is you got to pick up after all these Napoleonic crumbles and these little pieces that have been left behind, right? Which is a big, big issue, okay? So, give me 1 second. I got to turn my lunch off. Now, anyway, these are the big things that have to happen. Now, the balance of power has a nickname as well, right? The nickname is not the Congress of Vienna. The Congress of Vienna is the thing to reconstruct the balance of power, right? So the nickname to the balance of power in Europe is also known as the Concert of Europe, right? The Concert of Europe. What kind of music do you think was really, really big and popular during the early 1800s in Europe? Well, classical music, symphonic orchestras are still a really big thing, right? And for a symphonic orchestra to do just exactly what it needs to do, everything has to be in time, unison. Certain power instruments must be forward while the sedentary ones are in the back, right? So a lot of Napoleonic historians and a lot of historians in general have always referred to the Congress of Vienna and also the balance of power as this thing called the Concert of Europe, right? Right? That's what we're trying to get to, right? We're trying to get to this thing where power is completely balanced out, right? And the people that believe that they are the power instruments, the first chairs, the trumpets, the tubas, the cellos, the first chair violinists are the people known as the quadruple alliance, right? If you had to guess, who do you think would be in this thing called the quadruple alliance? First of all, no, Allie, it's not Pompey. One, all right? Second of all, okay, no parliaments are getting fired here, okay? Third of all, I understand why you would think it's France, but it's not, all right? So it can't be France. France just had a major failed invasion. They just exiled their leader twice, right? So they just had a huge loss at the Battle of Waterloo. You gotta remember, these are gonna be the four remaining coalition forces. Who were some of the big ones that we talked about? Let's get some guesses, come on. Boom! That's one right there. Brenna Scardino, Russia, right? Boom! That's one right there. Isabel Adams, Prussia. I know you didn't say Prussia, but it's okay. That's Prussia with a P. All right, so now, and we'll define who they are here in a second. And then, bang! Casey Williams. That is exactly right. Great Britain. And then the fourth one. Who's that? Who's there? Who's there? Come on, give me something. Boom! Lauren Caligari. That's exactly right. Austria, right? Those are your four big quadruple alliance members, right? Austria, Russia, Prussia, and Great Britain, okay? Now, looking forward down the ways, right? Down the ways and getting into more intense and more orchestrated things, okay? You got to understand, these are the four coalition groups that these four guys would always combine together to try and defeat Napoleon in his wars of the coalitions and or his Napoleonic wars, right? And every time they would lose, he would take a chunk of their empire. He'd take a chunk of their land, right? He's the reason why the Holy Roman Empire is dead, and now it's the Confederation of the Rhine, right? So, the Quadruple Alliance decides to get together at this meeting called the Congress of Vienna in 1814 to 1815. And they decided to also invite France, which was a really, really weird thing. It was much more of like an adults table and a kids table kind of thing, right? France was not allowed to really particularly do anything or make any choices, but they were known as Restoration France, right? They were allowed to come back in, and they told them, like, look, you can have a seat at the table, but we're just going to be telling you what's happening to you, right? So, because they wanted to fashion a general peace settlement that would begin right after Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo, right? So right after his defeat at Waterloo in 1815, when he's finally, like, actually completely exiled outside of Europe, all the way to Africa, they decide to start tuning up those instruments and to figure out this concert of Europe at the Congress of Vienna, right? Because the thing about it is, this is what it was like when Napoleon was in power. This is what they wanted. But this is what it was like. But this is what they wanted. What it was like, what they wanted. Like, wanted. And so as you can see, there's a lot of crazy stuff to get handled, right? So the big thing is, I'm going to try and add some more stuff like that into all these flips just to keep you into it, right? But remember, the Congress of Vienna is the meeting where they're going to try and fix all of those things. And then the Concert of Europe is this idea of a balance of power between the quadruple alliance, right? So the thing about it is, if our big issues are the balance of power, which we're figuring out, right, slowly at this whole meeting, right? What the heck are we going to do with post-Napoleonic France, though, right? Because remember, they were absolutely gigantic. Remember back when Napoleon's France was like this? Yeah. All right, so now, anyway, they were absolutely huge. So what do you do with them? Do you punish them, right? Do you, like, get after them a little bit? No. The Quadruple Alliance decided to be much more chill, relax, calm, right? They were like, look, we're going to set some new standards, right? We're going to check your power a little bit because you're doing too much, big fellas. You're doing too much, right? So they invited a very, very prominent French figure during the Revolution who actually kind of was against a lot of the early Napoleonic reforms. His name was Charles Talleyrand, right? Charles Talleyrand. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. A lot of teachers got questions about how to flip and stuff like that. So anyway, we got Charles Talleyrand here, right? Charles Talleyrand's a very famous figure throughout French history who is going to be the person, the representative for Restoration France, right? He's going to be the guy that's there being like, look, France is sorry. We didn't mean to, ruin everything. All right, so because let's be honest, Napoleon did ruin a lot of stuff. All right, so now he did ruin a lot of different things. But with Charles there, they come to a certain set of agreements, right? With Charles Talleyrand representing everyone, and I believe he's a royalist, but I'm not positive. But the biggest thing about it is he was a traitor, betraying in turn the ancient regime. Yeah, so he kind of like turned his back on everybody, and like every single time somebody would come to power, he would side with that person's power, right? So he changed sides immediately after the Napoleonic reign started to go down, and then he actually like was in favor of this balance of power concert of Europe thing, right? So the things that they're going to enter into, the provisions for France, are going to be the boundaries of 1792, right? That's right leading up to their War of the First Coalition, right? So this means that actually they got a little bit of extra territory, right? So the French originally had like a smaller amount of territory, so they end up getting a win, right? Also, France would not have to pay any war damages or reparations whatsoever, which is I wish somebody would have wrote down in 1815 so they could have then done it again in 1914. But we'll talk about that later on, all right? They also sought to restore the Bourbon dynasty, right? So they were like, we got to bring the king back, we got to bring the Bourbons back, because that is the way to be. We want to go back to being conservative, right? So really, really quick, go ahead underneath restoring the Bourbon dynasty. The guy they reappoint is a man named Louis XVIII, right? I believe he's the brother of Louis XVI, right? Now, underneath that, be like, this is a conservative move, right? This is going backwards, right? This is going back to the kings and stuff after the revolution just worked so hard to get rid of it. Because the goal of the Congress of Vienna was to never let the French Revolution or anything like it ever occur again, right? So they didn't want anything like that to happen. But here's the issue. You have some new ideas floating around out there now, right? You got new ideas floating around. That's bad. That's dangerous, right? And let's go over some of these ideas really quick. We're going to make like a little infographic for your notes real fast, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to make a new Google Doc, right? Because I don't have a whiteboard in here yet, but I want to have one like right here. And so then I can like go over here and draw on it and stuff. But let's go ahead and do this. So we're going to insert really quick a horizontal line, right? So we're going to insert a horizontal line. Boom, okay? Bang. We got a nice little political spectrum right here, right? So as you know, usually when you're referring to someone as being very, very leftist or liberal, you're saying that they're extremely to one way, right? So over here on the left-hand side of the political dynamic that we're about to get into a little bit is, okay, there we go. Sorry, I just got to be where I can type. We got the socialist, right? So socialism is going to be born during this entire thing, okay? Now the socialists, on the other hand, or wait, there we go. So the problem with socialism is we got to go over what they believe, right? Socialism believes in community-owned property and controls, right? So as in a government that's seeking to control the economy in a sense and also like kind of fight for people's rights and stuff like that, right? So they want community-owned property and controls. So also they want no monarchs, right? They favor legislative bodies, right? That's what they want, right? Legislative controls, boom. And they also want one big thing, universal suffrage, right? They want everyone to have a right to vote as long as they are working in the economy, right? So those are the socialists, right? Those are the wildly left group of people that were popping up during the 1800s of Europe, right? Then we've got the kind of middle of the ground people. Those people are known as classical liberals, right? So, now, ironically enough, before some of y'all roll your eyes and you're like, my parents told me I'm not supposed to like them. Well, check this out. Classical liberals are like modern-day conservatives, right? So modern-day conservatism is what it used to be known as classically liberal, right? So the big reason why we have to call them classical liberals is because modern-day liberals lean more towards socialism than they actually do classical liberalism, right? So classical liberalism favors some of these following things. Constitutions, right? They're big fans of constitutions. They are big fans also if there's a monarchy at all right? Constitutions. Now, if there's a monarchy at all, right, I'm going to go ahead and put an asterisk next to that because if there's one at all, they want a limited monarchy, right? So if there's one, period. So then we're going to move forward and we're going to say also they want partial suffrage. They want suffrage to rely with people that are educated, who typically own property and things like that. They also are a fan of this, laissez-faire economics, okay? They don't want anybody messing around in their economy. They are mostly business owners. They're educated. They are products of the Industrial Revolution. We're going to put that on here too. Products of Industrial Rev. Now, so these are not the old nobility. These are like the new nobility. This is the new money and stuff like that. And also the classical liberalism wants to do something very, very huge and very, very important, okay? They want legislative assemblies as well, which is something that they share with these ideas over here, right, with the socialists, okay? Then you've got all the way over here, okay, you've got the conservative, or conservatism, all right? So, conservatism, right? So, and then I'm going to put isms here, right, as well. So, and we're going to go like this and like that. There we go. Now, so conservatism during 1815, though, this is the 1815 spectrum of political thought. Okay, so there we go. Now, Conservatives, they want monarchs back. All right, they want absolutists back more than anything else. So absolutists. All right, so that's what they want. Also, how do they feel about How do they feel about constitutions? They hate constitutions, right? They hate constitutions, okay? Because they believe that they just, quite frankly, don't care if anybody has rights at all, okay? So they despise the concepts of constitutions. They want how much suffrage? Limited to no suffrage. They don't like to operate on these things known as plebiscites, right? A plebiscite is a universal suffrage movement or a group of people voting together, right? And they hate that. What Roman word do you hear in that plebiscite phrase? Of course, the word plebe, right? The lower class. And then last but not least, they want control over the economy, right? They like mercantilism. They like all these other really, really big things. So that's your political spectrum right there, right? These are the first big 3 isms that we're getting into this unit. Not to mention the other isms we're going to talk about. We're going to talk at one point about how like the socialists kind of split and they turned into like the French utopian socialists and then all this other stuff. But the conservatism, classical liberalism, socialism are going to also then conflict with communism, which is like way over here. And then also like not even hyper-capitalist, right? I would call hyper-capitalism right here classical liberalism because ironically enough, conservatism are not that during this time period like capitalism, right? Let me go ahead and put that on here too. They like capitalism. I'm going to go vitalism, all right? So now, that's what they want, right? That's what all these different groups want. And as you can see, this is that whole problem, right? Because who's back in control right now? The conservatives are back in control. Who wants to have revolutions? The classical liberals want to have revolutions. Who wants socialism? The extremely poor want socialism, right? The destitute want socialism. The lower ends of society want socialism. Because it's a very fancy idea if you're a poorer person in Europe, because it's like, wait a minute, you're telling me that my government can't stop me? I can vote for all of my representatives. They're there to protect me, and I get an equal share of however much I work in something? Ooh. Right? So, like, they love that idea. It's very, very appealing to the poor in Europe, right? Even though, ironically enough, in its purest sense, it's not really effective, right? Just like in its purest sense, capitalism isn't really effective. None of these isms are completely effective in their pure sense, right? And then we're going to also get into nationalism, we're going to get into imperialism, and we're going to get in, like, we could even incorporate industrialism into this whole thing. But as you can see, this is a very intense time, right? Because that's all the Congress of Vienna, the concert of Europe wants, is to keep the revolution from ever happening again, right? And how do you achieve that? How do you keep the How do you keep France back down a little bit? How do you keep them like kind of like lower than everybody else, right? You do this by enlarging the countries around them, right? I was going to say companies. You enlarge the countries around them, right? So you enlarge the Dutch, right? The Netherlands gets a bigger chunk of the steak of Europe. You also give the Prussians a bigger stake. Really quick, anywhere in your notes where you see the phrase Prussia, Prussia is like baby Germany, all right? It's a very, very small autonomous state in Europe that was growing as the Holy Roman Empire was dying. And they're German-speaking, and they're led by this family known as the Hohenzollerns. All right, so Hohenzollerns, the Hohenzollerns, right? So, like, all of them named Frederick, all right? So now, anyway, so, really quick, though, all these things were achieved by 2 guys I don't care what to talk about. They were really, don't write those other 2 names. They were really, truly achieved by this guy, Prince Clemens von Metternich, right? So Clemens von Metternich becomes like the conservative superhero. Your parents, if they're conservative or if they're liberal, would all universally hate this guy, right? So like, but he did usher in the longest era of peace in Europe, known as the Age of Metternich, right? So the Age of Metternich was kind of defined by a long-standing peace following the French Revolution, right? Now, however, he's a conservative, right? He's a big-time proponent of conservatism. He wants old Austria-Hungarian empires back. He wants slavery back. He wants to get rid of suffrage, and he wants the absolute monarchies back. But we do kind of like, in a way, think he's like a lot like a Napoleonic figure because we all love peace, right? Everybody loves peace, even though this guy's he's kind of sketchy, right? So, but that's where we're going to end on this flip for right now, and then we're going to kind of breeze through the rest of like the political ideologies of the 1800s, and then starting after that, we're going to get into the nationalism, Latin American independence movements during the Napoleonic era. So we're going to kind of rewind yet again just to kind of go forward again, but it's okay, right? Because now we're talking about the standing European political situation. Okay, so but we're gonna pick up right there before we get a little bit further into like Latin America and its liberation movements, and we'll talk about that stuff tomorrow. All right, or Friday, I guess. Right. So see you guys then.